right, to get started tonight, I want to welcome everybody here tonight. The mayor could not attend the meeting, so I get the honor, if that's good or bad, I get to do all the work. But this is well, first have a public hearing tonight where there'll be a presentation by Brennan Keane, our development director, and then we'll follow through on the public hearing process of comments opposing or in opposition, or I'm sorry, in favor or in opposition. And it isn't necessarily a contentious issue, but if you do have comments or anything you'd like to put on the record, it will be heard into the public hearing. And then this is a joint meeting, or this is a Plan Commission meeting. We have invited Vision Committee members as well as City Council members to the meeting, so that's why there's kind of a wide array of people here tonight. So we'll start with call to order and roll call. We have Edelbeck, Kinnear, Keelan, Lutzy, Olson, and Fair, the Plan Commission. And I will go ahead and read the purpose of the meeting tonight. Purpose of the hearing. Plan Commission of the City of Waupaca will conduct a public hearing regarding its proposed application for Community Development Block Grant Planning Program, CDBG PLNG funds. The public is invited to attend to learn about the CDBG program, to help identify additional community development needs, and to comment on the activities proposed to be included in the CDBG application. The agenda for the public hearing is identification of total potential funds, eligible CDBG activities, presentation of identified community development needs, identification of any community development needs by the public, presentation of activities proposed for the CDBG application, including potential residential displacement, citizen input regarding proposed and other CDBG activities. Residents of the city of Waupaca are encouraged to attend, especially residents with low to moderate incomes. And this meeting room is handicap accessible, and specifically this is a requirement for CDBG fund applications would be to hold a public hearing as we are tonight. So we are tape recording the meeting, so if you do speak, we do not have a microphone, but if you would speak up so we can get picked up on the tape recorder. And with that, we will turn it over to Brennan for a presentation.
Okay. Thank you, John. And John, since you are leaving us, we want to put this on you, and that's why.
Yeah, perfect. Huh?
But I do want to thank the Plan Commission for meeting this evening, and also I did reach out to not only the Common Council, but also the Downtown Vision Committee as well to attend this meeting. Due to the fact that the meeting is twofold tonight, and as John explained, the city is seeking to apply for some community development block grant money for the next phase of the downtown master planning process. But as for one of the requirements, we're required to have a public hearing. So I was trying to do a dual purpose, and I wanted to present kind of the draft plan to you guys, all the work that the Vision Committee has conducted and prepared over the last year and a little bit over that. And then we also wanted to kind of just go through briefly some of the requirements, what the next phase is going to be, what the next steps are going to be, and aspects of the block grant program as well. In advance, Eric does send his apologies for not being here tonight. He is in Seattle at the planning conference, which I'll be attending here in a couple of days, so he's fortunately out there while everyone's here this evening. Everybody at the table has a little packet. Anyone that's here from the public, I do have additional handouts on the back for anyone that has any interest. But the process we're going to go through here is hopefully just go through the brief presentation that I have here, open up for the conversation as John discussed. But as we get into the meat of the Plan Commission, I'm hoping to at least get some conversation among all the committees and council members that are here in the Plan Commission. We're not making any recommendations tonight. I really just wanted to bring everybody up to speed of where we are at the moment, talk about the public comments that we've had, but no actual physical decisions can be made tonight. I'll go through the next steps, but there's a couple of meetings that are scheduled here in the coming weeks that will actually discuss and hopefully make a recommendation to the Common Council for adoption of the downtown plan. So just to start off here, when we started this process, and Eric had a different slide here, but we started this process almost a little bit over a year ago. We started this in February of 2014 is when the Common Council actually established the Downtown Visioning Committee, and we actually had our first meeting to talk about the downtown plan. I think when we first conceptualized this, the reasoning for bringing a group of business owners, property owners together was to really talk about kind of the next steps, hopefully the reconstruction of Main Street here in the future. But as we started this process, we really wanted to talk about a little bit more of what is downtown and start creating, start discussing about, what is placemaking and everything else. So some of the guiding principles that we looked at early on was what the Project for Public Spaces put out about placemaking. And these are some of the underlying things that we talked about as we went through the entire process, and you'll see in greater detail later on how some of the elements that we've addressed or looked at filter into the project, and why I think what we originally started with as looking at Main Street reconstruction has dwarfed into more of a downtown master plan and some of the outskirts of the properties that surround it as well. So the diagram we have here in front of you is kind of the 4 guiding principles that urban planners use when we talk about placemaking. We talk about the uses, activities, and that just talks about what occurs in the downtown areas, different types of friendly events, free public concerts, everything else. The comfort and image, you got to feel safe, you got to feel secure in the downtown area. So how do some of the buildings look, how do the backs of buildings look, and everything else. The place's character and charm. I think we're very fortunate here right now that our downtown and our community has a great downtown charm. As we've talked with several of the state representatives who used to be a Main Street community, they love our downtown because of just the historical character that we have and everything else. Access and linkages, we talk about Main Street, but what are the other access points and linkages, and how to, from a pedestrian standpoint, not automobile, but really talk about, trail networks and bicycle pedestrian facilities and other multimodal transportation networks. How do those link into the downtown area as well? And then the sociability aspect of it is just bringing people together. That's what starts creating the sense of place. And people where they feel stronger, they feel a sense of a community because of the activities that we bring together. I'm not going to go through the 11 points that the Project for Public Spaces developed, but they've developed these 11 principles that we've utilized and formulated throughout the process. Those handles are actually in front of you for you guys to take a look at as well. But one interesting thing to talk about is space is a physical description of a piece of land, whereas a place, more talks about the emotional attachment to the piece of land. And they'll, as you see as we go through here, we start identifying some of that. So early on in the process, the visioning committee, which is again comprised of approximately 15 business owners, a couple landowners in the downtown here, we were able to receive a technical assistance grant from East Central Wisconsin. That's why we facilitated this. But some of the early exercises that we conducted was, what is downtown? Everyone has a different mindset of what actually downtown is. So one of the first exercises we talked about, we asked people to draw on a map. What do you guys think downtown is from your perspective, from the vision committee members? We talked about some of the existing downtown assets. What are some of the numerous features or places that people have identified as a sense of place right now where they enjoy going to. That could be the library, that could be a local coffee shop, a park aspect, a bench. Those are some of the physical assets that we talked about. And we did a little exercise talking about the downtown connectivity, and we looked at the locations where people are actually coming to, where they're going to, and how do those connections actually make. What's interesting about this is some of this work that has gone on for the linkages is also being worked on right now with the Parks Department. They're doing a bicycle and pedestrian plan, and some of the conversations we've talked about in the vision committee have also transferred over to on-street, off-street bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. We had a conversation about who lives in downtown. We also had conversations on where do some improvements need to be made, and again, that it was across the board. We talked about, is it just Main Street? Is it different park? Is it is it the intersection? So there's people marked on the maps of where they felt were some of the necessary needed areas, and we also talked about what are some of the places. We kind of did a 10 by 10 by 10 exercise where they identified 10 places and then 10 activities that could actually occur within that place. One of the additional exercises we talked about is, when we talk about the historical charm and character and sense of place, we talk about, you know, what people identify Waupaca is right now. So we looked at it from the past, from a historical standpoint. We looked at it as the present, you know, the current culture, what do people feel, and then kind of the future a little bit is, you know, what should Waupaca be? What, you know, what do people actually want Waupaca to be at the end of the day? And then we also did an exercise, you know, from a downtown visioning perspective. What are some of the gaps? We don't have a physical market study that has been conducted right now, that will be conducted in the future as for, from a retail standpoint of what we're actually missing. But there's always the interesting idea of what's on people's minds. What are the types of retail shops or restaurants or breweries or anything else? Some of those assets, what are we missing? So we went through that exercise and kind of talked about the different gaps that, you know, are in downtown. People talk about shoe stores, microbrewery, or where's Robert? I think he's still here. That'll hopefully be opened up a little bit later, but some of the other aspects and goods and services that people felt that were missing. We also talked about other events or programming that's missing in the downtown area. And, you know, the art walks, the historical tours, and everything else. And right now, we're working on a couple of downtown events, hopefully later this summer, that's gonna bring some more activity to the downtown and start kickstarting some of this placemaking process. And then some of the other organizations or groups that we felt were missing. Again, Waupaca used to be a Main Street community in the past, but due to funding and some other reasons, we went away from that. But there's opportunities to maybe reinvent that, maybe be more of a connect community and still get some state assistance. And there's some other groups, you know, neighborhood watches, everything else that was identified during this process. And by the way, feel free if anyone has any questions, or we can hold off to the end, but if you have any questions along the way. So one of the first public inputs that we received, or we were trying to get public feedback, was, you know, the original maps that you guys just saw, and some of them were actually located on the back, we put in the public lobby to just kind of gain initial comments, people that were walking into City Hall, and we left a board out there that pretty much said downtown Waupaca should. We left it open-ended. We want people to comment on anything and everything at the end of the day. I can tell you, it's a great conversation piece, some of the comments that we had, but there's great feedback that we received from that, and some of that feedback was utilized when we started looking at later plans and everything else of pieces. So it was definitely, from a standpoint, at least to get initial comments, these comments, some of them were filtered into some of the later plans that we talked about. Once we started doing some of the public inputs and everything else that started moving the vision committee along, we started at a very high hierarchy of downtown planning, looking at you know, some of the aspects of, you know, what we wanted to actually focus on. You know, because of the maps that we identified, what we, you know, early on in the process, what people felt downtown was, we came up with a study area, and it's kind of identified on those maps, but relatively it's kind of, you know, within this green jagged line is kind of the study area that we identified as what downtown was going to be. And some of the aspects that we looked at from the meetings was, you know, we looked at the need to make some gateways or focal points. So we're very fortunate to have, you know, historical neighborhoods to the south. You know, we're fortunate that 54, you know, brings us out to the Chain of Lakes. And the northern Main Street kind of connects us to the foundry and industry that's been present for so long. And then we also have another, you know, connection, you know, by School Street and our rec center as well. And we identified some of the needed, you know, place improvements, you know, of course, Main Street with the reconstruction hopefully, but we started looking at some aspects of Fulton Street and Main Street as well. You know, people identified through this process some of the concerns that they had from a pedestrian standpoint, you know, crossing the roads, it was unsafe. So some of those were, you know, being brought into it. And one of the things that we talked about was, you know, some other green elements, potentially bringing some more green into downtown. This plan kind of led us to this general concept early on in the process. There's a lot of information here, but, you know, what we really identified, and this is, we have 3 different maps here, we've all joined them together, but the physical map, pretty much that you see on here right now, is kind of the concept A. And we talk about, you know, looking to, you know, develop some design standards for Main Street, have a little bit more sense of place, more of a set of standards for all buildings, you know, for renovations to, you know, that starts to establish the character. when we had the Main Street program, there was actually a set of design guidelines that were established but never adopted. So we would be looking at that as a recommendation to, in the future, maybe to adopt some design standards. We talked about and identified, renovations of the buildings and refocusing ourselves to the green space in the river that's behind some of these buildings. We're very fortunate to have the Waupaca River behind us, and a lot of the committee members felt that there was a strong emphasis and desire to, renovate some of those buildings in the back. There was the projects that have occurred down there, the redevelopment of the park and the band shelter down there have started that process, but, the next phase of it, renovating some of the existing buildings and cleaning those up, outdoor patios and everything else. T-Dubs, I think, is a great example of one business that's been successful of trying to refocus on the back river and really making that a secondary space, but still making it inviting at the same time. We looked at the options for potential mixed-use development areas, which are identified in orange. By no means are we saying today that we're going to be looking in the future tearing down these buildings. I want to put that on the record right now. It's just ideas of long-term development. If we were looking at redevelopment opportunities, where could they be? Some of the places that we've identified are city-owned parking lots. Is there an opportunity to do a mixed-use development there as a consideration? Some of the other aspects we talked about, the 4 different gateways that we have here. If some people have been to Milwaukee, we have some archways over. Really create that sense of place and character for the downtown. Plan 1B and 1C are really just some additional green aspects. One of the considerations that we looked at is, Session Street is kind of underutilized right now, but it's a perfect link up to the ramp that goes down to Rotary Riverview Park. So is there an opportunity to maybe make that more of an inviting space, make it a green space, whether that's taking out some parking, just adding some trees in there, to be determined. And then Plan 1C that we talked about was more along the lines of looking at East Fulton Street and making that connection. There's been a lot of discussion over the years by the city council and the community, from I've heard about the structure that's at the end of East Fulton Street, whether it's a possibility of maybe purchasing that, renovating it. There's options there, but maybe making that more of a green corridor and a secondary access down to the park as well. We've also identified here, the potential for maybe a redesign of City Hall and forward thinking. If we're looking at this as a visioning plan for long term, we identified if we were very successful and there was a need for, we were able to attract a lot of mixed use development, there may be a need, and I say may for park construction in the future. So we started to identify maybe a location or two in the downtown that could accommodate maybe a park construction in the future. But again, that's hypothetical. Not saying we need it, but always looking at least a plan for it in the future, long term. So those plans, this kind of concept plan that we have here led to the next 3 plans that you're going to see. Now, the next 3 plans, I can tell you that when we brought this forward to the Downtown Visioning Committee early on in the process, we had about 7 or 8 different ideas that we identified. Some of them are very similar. Some of them, talked about having parking in the middle. Some of them talked about having a green boulevard. The Visioning Committee at least narrowed it down to 3 that we're going to present here. We don't have a consensus yet, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We're hoping to gain some insight tonight from people that are here. We'll talk about some of the future public comments that we've had, but I'm going to present the 3 that were presented to the Downtown Visioning Committee and then also during the mobile office. For consideration. Doesn't mean that's the direction, but at least we have 3 ideas. The first alternative that we have here, and I apologize, it's a little bit small, but they're larger on the back, is alternative A, which is pretty much keep the angle parking that we have right now. We're specifically talking Main Street reconstruction here at the moment. So keeping the current conditions that we have out there right now, but we're looking at the possibility of, our travel lanes are relatively wide out there right now. So if we change some of the angle degrees that we have out there at the moment, this is what the cross section of Main Street could look like in the future if we were to maintain the existing, the current configuration of angle parking on both sides. The 3 options that we have here, we're trying to take into consideration a lot of the comments that we heard about. It's unsafe, it's not pedestrian friendly, it's not creating a sense of place right now. So some of the elements that we put in here, and it's kind of hard to see, but on all the corners, especially Fulton Street and Main Street, we added some amenities of pedestrian bump outs onto the corners. That lessens the travel distance for people actually having to cross the road. It makes it more visible for people that are waiting for as cars are traveling through. We've also, the bump outs also kind of serve as a traffic calming method for people that are driving through. We heard some concerns of speed and everything else. So we were trying to provide as many pedestrian elements as possible into the downtown. Some of the other things that we talked about were, if we were trying to create a sense of place and more vibrancy in the downtown, we don't know what the uses are going to be long-term downtown. We can only estimate. But we also want to try to provide for all different opportunities, whether it's outdoor cafes, whether it's the opportunity to have more outdoor retail, sidewalk sales, or events. This option A, limits us from a planning perspective of really creating that sense of place on the sidewalk. 12-foot sidewalks, although they're wider, it's about 2 feet wider than what's out there right now, do limit us in allowing to have really a nice space for people to sit outside on Sunday to have a drink or to eat lunch or dinner or sidewalk sale and still have the ability for people to actually pass through. So, that does limit us a little bit on what we can or can't do. This option pretty much would keep about the same amount of stalls that we have on Main Street. We may lose a couple just due to the fact of the bump outs and restripe into a lesser severe angle than what's out there right now, but that is one option. The second alternative that we discussed was parallel parking. Parallel parking would provide us the opportunity to, we went from one extreme to the other. So we had 12-foot sidewalks on the angle. So now we're looking at 22-foot wide, potentially sidewalks. So you can narrow it down to 20, make it a little bit more wider travel lane or parking lane. But this is what, parallel parking would potentially look like in the downtown and accommodate for the downtown. Upside, wider sidewalks, more inviting spaces along, the businesses out front and everything else. Downside to this is we lose about half the parking stalls in downtown. It's definitely a challenge, that we heard, and I think we'll have some of that conversation a little bit later about that. But from the comments that that we have heard so far, it could be a challenge from some business owners if they lost those spots out front. So again, from one extreme to the other, from the pedestrian. So again, this one does have the same pedestrian elements on the corners, with the bump outs and everything else. Again, we have so many different options. We didn't really get into, as we went through this process, there's still a lot of things that we need to discuss. Do we do concrete? Do we do blacktop? Do we do brick crosswalks? All those things are going to be decided later on. We did through the process, but not shown in here. It is in the draft report. We did at least get some image preference survey done during the process of what people preferred. And so some of those elements that we see here have been included in the plan. Alternative C that we presented was kind of a compromise between the parallel and the angle. And this option would keep angle parking on one side, which would be, we're proposing to be on the west side of Main Street right now, and then have parallel parking on the east side as an alternative. This option allows us to, gain some additional square footage and space on the sidewalks to about 16 feet, which, from a planning perspective, you try to get, minimum 15 feet, for a nice area for sidewalk sales and all those other activities that, we've heard comments of what some people would like. Again, you keep the angle parking, the travel lanes, this all fits within the existing right-of-way we have out there right now. This option, if we were to go this route, would eliminate approximately 30 stalls from what's out there right now. On Main Street alone, we have about 134, give or take a couple, but we have about 134 stalls out there right now, so it would reduce it a little bit. But again, we're not favoring one option or the other. We just wanted to present these three to everybody. During the last week in March, I did have a mobile office. We wanted to get out into the community from a city level perspective and invite people into a vacant storefront in the downtown. I appreciate anyone that did have the opportunity to come by and look at the temporary setup that we did have there. I estimate we probably had about 30 to 40 people that actually stopped in, which was okay. I was probably hoping for a little bit more. And we did have, we did have actually an exercise for people as we'll go through here. The stuff that you guys see out on the walls and everything else here tonight was presented to the community, and we had a little worksheet for people to actually go through to kind of get some public input. But Station 3, when we talk about, if you guys remember this image right here, about the different concept plans that we're looking at, a lot of people preferred option 1C, which was the more green space at the end of the day. That included adding some green space on Session Street and some additional green space potentially on East Bolton Street as an option. That was kind of the preferred option alternative that we got from there. And those are just a couple of the comments that we received from people that did stop in. When we look at which option people liked for the street section, the reconstruction of Main Street, we got mixed feelings. On one side, I can tell you right now that parallel parking was the least preferred option because I think the reduction in parking that's out there or what could occur. But it was mixed between people identified they liked the wider sidewalks, they liked the opportunities for some of the events and opportunities for businesses could do out in the sidewalk, but there's still the challenge of potential losing the parking stalls in the downtown area. What we identified is, this is just a map of kind of the existing parking stalls. We need more study on the parking aspect in downtown. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we have a good understanding of what the preferences are from the public and the community we feel right now. It's now about what the real impacts are, and there's two methods here. We've heard that there's not enough parking. We've heard that there's too much parking. So we don't have critical data right now that's going to back up one scenario or the other. But we at least have to this point the preference of what people feel at this moment. And like I said, I'll talk about what the next steps are going to be. We also had a station on there that kind of talked about big ideas. We just had a map up there, and I said, throw anything up on there, what people thought, what people wanted. Just a couple of comments that came out is some people talked about turning the hotel into a temporary homeless shelter. Everyone's probably aware, and this is actually incorrect. It's Foundations for Living was the comment that people put out there as maybe an alternative location for their facility that they're looking at. Some people talked about expanding the library, city hall, and creating more of a community space. Some people discussed, what could be done out front. Yes, we have a green space right now, but it's very underutilized. Could we expand that? Can we redesign the front lawn, as I call it, along Main Street to be more inviting and more engaging to people? There's an idea about expanding to have a reading room at the library. There are some discussions of raising, the apartment buildings throughout, whether it's the old hotel, whether it's the apartment buildings on the north side or North Main Street. They talked about the Danes home. We do have some challenges here. There's no doubt about it, but the consensus was mixed-use development. Resident or commercial, retail type of uses on the ground floor and residential up above. There was a common theme of people wanting to have, I think, the ability to live, work kind of in the downtown. We're very fortunate. There's a couple business owners that do that now, but I think if we get some of the other uses that people are looking for, maybe a grocery store, maybe some of these other amenities that would attract people to want to come back downtown and move back downtown, but we also need to update some of the housing that we have right now. Kent, thank you very much, and I have to get this back to you. But we did receive, I appreciate Kent Vergosh over at Main Street Marketplace. He kind of ran his a separate little, downtown Waupaca. What do you like about downtown? He dropped this off for me, and I appreciate him doing that for his customers that came in. And we did receive a couple emails afterwards, and all the public comments, everyone that's on the table, and there's some in the back as well, all the public comments that we gained during the mobile office is in front of you. You can certainly take a look at that and read them. But we also received about 3 or 4 different emails from several members of the Arts Board talking about art installations and future impacts we could do with the art community here in downtown as well. So we have some of those comments that we received. But very similar, I think, to the comments that I received at the mobile office. I think Kent received as well, kind of at his storefront, and the customers that came in. They liked the community. There's definitely some challenges about the parking, make it a little bit more green. Some people liked it the way it was right now. Some people we talked, there was definitely some concern about, curfew, and we've had some recent incidents in the downtown area. So we need to be, maybe there needs to be more of a police presence in the downtown, not only from a parking standpoint, but also maybe from a enforcement standpoint as well. So what are the next steps in this process? The next steps that we have here is we have this joint meeting tonight between the plant, again, the Plan Commission is holding the public hearing. We're going through, and I'll double check to make sure that, we talk about the block grants and everything else. But we're here this evening as a collective whole. We are bringing the downtown visioning plan, the draft plan to everybody. I apologize, it's not 100% done. It's probably about 90 to 95. But the downtown visioning committee is going to meet on April 27th to formulate a recommendation, hopefully. Again, I think, we have a couple of members here tonight. At the end of the day, we have three scenarios, three alternatives. I don't expect, if the consensus at the end of the day is we move forward with all three, we move forward with all three. I think I would hope that based upon the public comments that we received, the discussion that occurs this evening amongst all the committees and the commissions and the council, that we can maybe, lean towards maybe a recommendation. We're not making any actions tonight, but the visioning committee is going to take the draft plan up for consideration on April 27th. On the 29th of April, the Plan Commission is going to meet and discuss the downtown visioning plan and make a recommendation to the common council. May 5th, we are bringing all this to the city council for consideration and hopefully adoption of the visioning plan. The May 5th meeting is also going to have a couple final resolutions that we need to pass that evening for our block grant program. Actually due by this Friday, so we have two different grant programs going on. I just want to brief everybody that we have two community development investment grants, which is run through WEDC, that we're applying for. One is a planning grant for the next step in this process and the downtown master plan. We also have an implementation grant for Lucky Tree that they are looking to relocate to the former Office Outfitter building at 100 North Main Street. So they're looking to renovate that building. So on behalf of them, we are applying for some implementation grant monies to assist them with reconstruction and renovation and restoration of that building. In May of 2015, once we get this adopted, and I talked about this a little bit here, the city, one of the biggest things we've heard for a very long time through this entire process is parking. Parking. Parallel parking, angle parking. We have too much, we don't have enough. City lots are underutilized. We've heard all the comments, but we don't have any critical or factual data that's going to back it up. So the city is going to take the first step and actually will be sending out an RFP for a parking study by the end of May. This is all going to be coming to the council in the next couple of meetings here, but the intent is for the city to start this process to hopefully put aside or at least get some more critical data from the downtown master plan consultant. We are taking on the emphasis of doing a parking study. That's going to take a look at kind of the downtown area. We don't have the full scope figured out yet, but it's really parking utilization study. They might do some forecast models in there of, if redevelopment does occur in the downtown, what types of businesses, what types of use would actually occur there. That would at least start giving us the factual data of whether or not we have enough parking, not too much parking, or we'll start identifying, the gaps that we have. Along with that, we're going to have a separate RFQ, request for qualification. Once this plan is adopted and we get approval from the city council, we are going to send out an RFQ for the downtown master plan. The downtown master plan is going to encompass two different aspects of it. There's a component in there that's going to be 30% design plans for the Main Street reconstruction, and that's going to start giving the city council, the staff that's going to work on this, some preliminary numbers of what it's actually going to cost to reconstruct Main Street, what is actually needed and everything else. The master plan is also going to be a full-blown master plan that's going to talk about redevelopment of the downtown long-term. Will probably provide us a 5, 10, 15-year outlook of redevelopment opportunities. There's going to be a market study that's going to be a part of that as well. That's going to identify what our community can actually absorb, what's, from a statistics standpoint, what's missing, what are the gaps right now. So that's gonna be the next phase of those two projects, that's where this is gonna go. And then at the end of May, our community development block grant application is due, and that grant, as why we're here this evening, is for the planning aspect of the master plan. The city has allocated about $50,000 to date for that process, but we're still in need of another $40,000 to $50,000 for the actual master plan process. In July, we're hopefully going to award a contract to a parking consultant, and the parking study will commence at that time. We're gearing up for it so that it's after Memorial Day. We all know that the population of Waupaca doubles, triples, balloons during the summertime, so it's a great opportunity in our opinion to actually get a true understanding of where the gaps are. You know, are we underutilized, overutilized for parking? We're also going to be submitting, hopefully with the council approval, for a WISDOT STP urban grant application. I'll give John his time in a little bit here to talk about that application and the design consequences that may come with that. We're hopefully going to have the parking study completed by Labor Day, September-ish. It's our preliminary timeline that we have right now. And we're also hopefully to award the contract. We're hopefully going to hear back from both of our grant applications by September at the latest for both of them. We're hopefully going to award the consultant for the downtown master plan later in September, early October. And that RFQ process is going to take a couple months. You know, we're expecting, you know, probably a lot of interest for this. We're going to do probably a regional approach to try to get some, you know, consultants maybe from a couple different markets to really take a look at this. Hopefully, once the contract is awarded for the master plan, again, upon the city council approving this and buying into everything, we're looking at about a little bit over a year for the downtown master plan to be completed. Just to let you guys know, don't feel out. We're going to definitely, one of the biggest things that we're going to have throughout the entire process is a lot of public meetings, a lot of public input sessions throughout that process. We're not leaving everybody out. And I think we've been very transparent to date, and we're going to continue that philosophy. We may look at trying to do a couple more downtown temporary setups to gain input. You know, all those things are up for discussion. We're looking at hopefully right around December of 2017 to have the final engineering done for Main Street. Again, as we go through this process, if, you know, and John will talk about it a little bit, you know, if we go through this process to apply for the STP urban grant funding through WISDOT, which is the federal program, you know, they've estimated anywhere from 24 to 36 months alone just for design of Main Street, because it has to go through so many different approval processes. But probably what, you know, one of the bigger concerns that we're looking at right now, what people are looking at is construction. What we're anticipating is roughly either April through October of 2018 or 2019 is probably when we're actually looking to reconstruct Main Street. With that, I'm going to take a break here, and if anyone has any questions or if we want to wait to the end, we can. Otherwise, John, if you want to do your presentation on what I wanted to do, since we have the Planning Commission here this evening, some members of the Common Council and the Downtown Vision Committee, we're trying to leverage as much grant dollars as possible into this project. So, you know, the reason why we're here is the block grant for the planning aspect. But Henry, John, and myself had a conversation with the WISDOT about a potential funding mechanism for the construction of Main Street. So we wanted to at least present that to you guys tonight. We want to be very transparent with everybody that's here and to the public, because the design implications that may come with this program, I think should be at least put out on the table right now. So with that, I'll leave it up to John to kind of just do a brief overview.
Okay, I've got a handout, and I'll hand it out afterwards, and I'll go through this briefly. This is kind of the main sheet, but I want to talk about a few things. As Brennan said, there's a program called DOT STP Urban. STP is Surface Transportation Program. And the city utilized this program in about 1995 for Tower Road. So it's been over 20 years that we've utilized this program. We get an allotment, depending on what the state legislators and the governor budgets on an every other year basis. So basically, it's taken us 20 years to get back above zero. We built that road, if you recall, the sharp curves by the foundry that Tower Road used to have by DUX, and how bad that was, and it was really a nice project to straighten out those curves and improve that roadway. But it's taken 20 years now to get back in the black in that program for SDP Urban. So we now have an allocation amount of $6,500, which is good. That's a positive. It's important to have that to apply for future projects. That was as of December of 2014. We expect this summer, again, depending on legislation and the governor's budget and all that, this column should be shifted over. But 6,500 and 145 we expect to be allocated this summer in July. So our expected allocation by this summer is 151,500. Okay, that's in talking to the DOT, and that's where we expect to be. I also do show there's a county allocation, 198, and they expect a $200 amount, so their allocation goes up to 413. Now, the Waupaca urban area is really what you think of it as. If you get rid of all of our municipal boundaries and you draw a line around the Waupaca urban area, King Road, and so forget about the townships and cities and county lines. And it's a different map that the county or that the SDP Urban uses. So it's our urbanized area. The townships get allocated money, this county gets allocated money, and the city gets allocated money. And we've all utilized SDP Urban in different manners. So what we're talking about is really $151,000 that we have. We think we're going to have this summer to be able to apply for a project. So, as Brennan said, I've had telephone conversations in February, and in March we went and visited with the DOT with the regional director that manages the SDP programs. So we have quite a bit of information on this because of that. So I'll just take you through a couple quick scenarios. If we take our 151,500, our allocation, and then we go in the hole, if we were to go in the hole on our allocation, another 600,000, and there's an 80-20 match on this program, so our 20% city money would be 200,000. We could apply for $1 million project. Okay, so again, a $1 million construction project. It would not be designed, and I'll explain that in a minute. So a $1 million construction project, the city would have to outlay $200,000 in cash or funds or outside of this program. We'd use our city allocation of 151, and we'd be in the hole 648. Okay, and we would have to work that back out again, obviously. And this isn't uncommon on how these SDP projects proceed. As I said, Tower Road has taken us 20 years to get out of the hole on that one. So this is a feasible project. There are other communities that have done projects like this with similar amounts of money, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm just kind of giving you an example, kind of working backwards. Here, if we had a $1.5 million project, our 20% match would be $300,000. We'd show our city allocation, and we'd be in the hole about $1 million. So DOT would rate these projects a little bit differently depending on how much money we have and how much we're going in the hole and all that. Again, it's just an example of what we can leverage, being able to leverage for $200,000 of city funds, leverage a $1 million construction project. That's pretty good. I mean, this is really a nice program, but there are strings attached, as you can imagine. I'll just read through some of that. I have a couple page narrative that I put together for, I'll be presenting to the council as well, some of this information. As a staff, we've reviewed this and gone through it with the mayor. DOT suggests that we apply only for construction funding and not design, and there's a number of reasons for that. It's a lot easier to get approved, and I've worked in with federal monies my whole career, and that's always been like that. It's very difficult. The approval process is much longer. You've got to follow their selection process, and it's really much easier. So I would recommend also on these projects that we either come up with a different source of funding or you borrow for design and go right for construction monies with this project. And it takes quite a bit of extra time. There is a stipulation that when we apply for this, we will most likely look to have a consultant help us that's applied for these projects in the past, a civil engineering firm. If there's a firm that assists us with that application, and then we ask for design construction monies to fund design, we cannot select that firm. The DOT regulates that. For whatever reason, I don't quite know how they got to that rule, but that's the case. So again, I would suggest that we do work with a consultant that's submitted these in the past. They know how to present those applications and to assist us with that submittal. And then we do not ask for design money as part of that application. Again, it's an 80-20 ratio. 20% local out of the 80% funding for the total project. We can't, there are times when you're in an 80-20 program and you might say that we'll kick in 30% to try to improve our odds. This program would not allow that. Only state statute can regulate or change that 80-20. So the projects are ranked by the size of the project, the entitlement or account balance of the applicant. If we were in the negative, we wouldn't even be able to apply for it. So that, again, that's a positive that we're in the black. And how much is allocated to the whole program. Now the STP program, there's many parts of the local DOT program. There's STP urban, STP rural, there's a bridge component. We're competing against communities of our size in the STP urban, 5 to 20,000. We're competing against communities larger than that for pools of money. And it's a very political decision on how much money is proportioned to all these different areas. And those are always at the whim of change by legislation. Again, we expect this summer for those dollar amounts to be out. The DOT is thinking that the STP urban for the 5 to 20,000 population, 5,000 to 20,000, will be about these numbers, and this is what we've had in the past. That's what they're telling us. Again, even on the news tonight, they're talking about the state legislators going through discussions and amending the budget and that, so that's all up for grabs. There have been discussions on this going to a 60-40 program, doubling this local share amount, and again, we're at risk of that. For projects in this cycle, you see it's a rotating cycle. It's called the 2015 to 2020. A project that is funded, if we get approval for this, would have to be completed by 2022. Just so you understand, once you get the monies approved, and that could be approved this year, you would have to have it completed by, I think, probably June or July of 2022. So there is the opportunity to stage that and schedule how you want that project to proceed, but you want to expend that money by 2022. I'll give you some more good news. I think this is pretty good news, but in the 2013 to 18 cycle, so the previous cycle from 2 years ago, all of the funds that were proportioned to STP urban for our category were not expended. So all the projects that applied were funded, unless they didn't qualify, unless there was something that didn't allow them to qualify. So they approved and they funded all the allowable or acceptable projects through this program. I talked about a comparable, the city of Lake Mills. They had $127,000 in their allocation, and they were approved for $1 million project in the last cycle. So again, it's feasible. It's something that, and we always try to figure that out, you know. Okay, these programs are out there. What are our chances of actually getting the money and being able to proceed? So again, I think there's some likelihood here that we could be successful. Diagonal parking here is the wild card. Diagonal parking generally is not allowed. Now we're required to follow federal design manual policy on these projects, because this is actually federal money that's being sent down through the state and administered through the state. There's specific language in what's called the facility design manual that allows DOT to treat diagonal parking as a design exception. During the design stage, calculations of the current crash rates, review of the crash reports would need to be submitted to DOT pavement width, posted speeds, traffic volumes, and the effect on the economic stability of the area. So all that data could be collected, could be submitted to the DOT, and we could ask for a design exception. We talked about the likelihood of these things happening. I don't know if that's very likely. It's possible. I don't know if it's very likely. Maybe on this project it is, but I think if we do get this project funded and approved and we do apply and we get it, I think that's the first decision you want to make. And I'll explain that in a minute too. from our discussions with the DOT, now this is only the north central region that we've talked to, they didn't seem that the chances were very good. In addition to that, Main Street between Badger and Fulton, they told us, so Badger to Fulton, the southern 2 blocks, is on the National Highway System, because that must have been Old Highway 10, I guess. This would require additional approvals if diagonal parking was allowed. So there's some more hoops there, that federal hoops we'd have to jump through, and may affect what's approved on those sections. Adding to that, what we call complete street design, Trans 75 design standards would be required, which further complicates the diagonal parking issue because you need to address safe bicycle accommodations on Main Street.
So John, are those things never dropped from those lists? Because that's long since been anything to do with Highway 10.
It's still part of this designation though, and it has certain criteria that they...
I understand what you're saying there, but in other words, there's no scenario to drop that designation? That will
That's a
remain
possibility.
in
I don't,
perpetuity?
that's a possibility. I don't really know much about that at all, that system, but that's, I think it's a hurdle that we have to, if we want to proceed with diagonal, that's a hurdle, additional hurdle that we will probably have to look at. Yeah.
It's not
So bicycle accommodations alone may knock out diagonal parking, because to be able to provide bicycle accommodations using the federal design manual and have angle parking is a conflict, you know. So again, I'm just kind of laying out the information that we found out about this. Bike lanes on adjacent streets have been talked about, and that might allow us to comply with Trans 75. So on adjacent streets, you might be able to provide bike traffic or bike lanes, and that may allow that. I do suggest that the city do apply for SDP urban monies for the Main Street project. What I would suggest is if you're awarded this project funding, the first step would be to hire an engineering consultant or have an engineering consultant for a pretty low rate, because there isn't a whole lot of work there, to collect the data that we talked about and to submit it to the DOT and ask them for a determination before you go and design the whole project. And then you find out at the end, okay, we gotta have parallel parking, and we don't know if we want parallel parking. Because your design is gonna be, you know, a Cadillac design. These are federal design standards, and they're gonna have to jump through different hoops dealing with architectural and all these different things. You know, so I suggest they get that done up front. And once you know that determination, it allows you to make an educated decision if you wanna move forward. And there's a few other things I just want to touch with real quick. In summary, we need a positive SDP balance to submit the application. We have that. Applying with larger allocations will assist us in increasing our chances for approval. So going from 6,500 to 151 is going to help us, okay, in our application. I do suggest that you fund your design locally and not with SDP funds. I would suggest that an engineering consultant with experience in this area assist in the application for a Main Street construction project fund only for the submittal. The submittal is required by July 31st. An earlier submittal is suggested by the DOT because they recommend an end of June submittal. Then they will actually bring staff out for that month and we'll look at your project, we'll sharpen the project for you, and we'll help you make it a probably more attractive project and increase the points on it. So they will work with us on that, and that gives them a month to do that for all the submittals. So really, you want to get something in probably by the end of June. Award notification is expected by the end of November. So it'll happen pretty quick. You'll know pretty quick whether it's funded or not. Once awarded, you can proceed with design engineering if not funded by the SDP. The DOT hires a consultant, which you end up paying for, to monitor the consultants, believe it or not. John knows about this. But that consultant can help the city in putting together a design contract with an engineer and can help follow the process along. So again, you pay for that, there's money there, but it's something that they can assist you with. Again, once you begin, once design begins, the first action would be get that information to the DOT and find out if you can get a design exception or not. There's a couple other positive things here. If you're awarded the SDP project funds, city can always drop the project in the future and not lose their allocation. This is the city's allocation. It's not going anywhere, okay? So let's say you get it, you apply, you're awarded it in November, and a year from now you say, geez, you know, this isn't right for us. We don't want to go down this route. They don't look poorly on you. They will put the money elsewhere, but that's still your allocation. And it's going to continue to grow every 2 years, hopefully, if legislation allows it. You can apply at a later date. You can substitute a project. They allow, once you're awarded, you can take a different project. Now, these are arterial streets in town, the main streets in town that the city would be looking at, but they would allow a substitution. And again, you've got till 2022. So it's not, you know, these are positive things for the city. There is another possibility of waiting until July 31st of 2017, 2 years from now, okay? The downside of that is the guidelines may change, funding ratios may change, the amount budgeted for the programs may change. They're probably likely to change after discussions that are taking place now. Within 2 years, this could go 60-40, the pool could shrink. I doubt that they're gonna go the other direction. So you're at risk of all those aspects. And then lastly, I would say that there are other programs available. Again, I think it's staff effort is needed to determine if the likelihood is there of getting funding. And we talked about CDBG. There's a whole other component of CDBG, public facilities program, that you could build public facilities with, like maybe a public works building. But streets are fundable through that also. And it is based on need, it is based on your median income and percentage of the median income of the state, which is what our CDBG program is based on here too. So I would suggest staff pursue that and obtain enough information, like as much information as we've dug into this program, into that program. There are other USDA rural programs, and it's one thing to look on the internet and look up the program, but I think, like we did, I think you gotta meet with the people and you gotta talk turkey with them and find out, really dig into it and find out what's available and what our chances are of pursuing some of these fundings. So that's about all I have. I do have a handout of kind of a description of the STP Urban, the angle parking design exception, and actually I had a USDA community facilities direct loan, and just to give people some more information on that. So, are there any questions? I know that was a lot to swallow. The council is going to have some decisions on their hands in the next few months on this. I unfortunately won't be here for that, but I strongly encourage you to apply. I think it's going to be minimal to apply, and you'll find out in November, and that'll help you make some decisions down the road. Again, this is a wonderful source of funds. I see this project, I would try to leverage as much as you could off of this versus another street. Evans Street would be an example of a street down the road that needs some work. Evans Street won't be anywhere near this amount. So you will use up your money, and you'll use up some allocation, but this is better bang for your buck, I think, if you could.
John, does the dollar amount, you got $1 million up here and then 1.5 down, does a larger one give you a better chance of getting money? Or?
No, I think this would hurt your point total, but if they don't have the submittals, you know, if they don't have the funding, they might be able to work backwards and say, look, we can fund this, but we got to go back to $1 million. We can't afford that. I mean, I think a dialogue with them will help, and they might be able to work with us on that. But this isn't going to help us. The smaller project would give us a better point total.
Because we're not going in the hole as much.
Yeah, it says in here, the information we received, size of the project affects the point total. Yeah, John?
In terms of time frame, just so everyone understands, you're talking about June, July this year?
This year.
So that's kind of getting things moving along the lines. How much of the work Brennan was describing, the traffic impact analysis or a parking analysis would need to be done, do you think?
Well, we have the application forms, it's really more based on cost, and
Okay.
it's the whole
Okay.
chicken and egg here, because we're
Yeah.
applying for a grant for a
Yeah.
project that we haven't designed yet. So how do we know how much?
Yeah.
So we deal with it all the time, but I think that if you get a consultant that has worked especially on these projects, federally designed projects, you can
Right.
get a pretty good dollar amount.
Right, you get a pretty good dollar amount, you also get a lot of time. I think that's the important thing to take from your statements too, John, is 2022, you said?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a long time to budget if it turns out to be a $1.2 million project, or something along those lines. It gives the city time to budget for any shortfalls too that
Right.
might occur.
And this, let's say this is a $2 million project. Maybe this is a piece of the puzzle. Maybe this is one funding piece of the puzzle. Maybe there's a business district. I know you don't want to hear that, but that might be a part of it. There may be, the city may provide some savings over the next 5 years to try to build it up. There may be a borrow component. There may be, but this is a pretty good chunk of money that you're leveraging
Yeah.
on a 5-to-1 basis.
It doesn't limit the project to $1 million. It allows for that to be the basis for the project, and then
Right,
you could build on
right.
top of that
So-
if need be.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was really happy to hear this, because I've been thinking a lot about this SDP money, because I knew we were in the hole for years with Tower Road, and I contacted Dean, who gets these reports, and I started talking to Dean before Christmas about this, and when I found out we were starting to get in the black, and then things were getting better. So there's been some real positive discussions on this.
Yeah, it's grant money on the table, so
Yeah.
nice to have.
Thanks, John. And we'll follow up, we'll have a question section here in a few minutes, but I just want to, as you can see, from a staff level perspective, we presented kind of the draft downtown plan, we can go over those questions, but, from a city level perspective, city effort, we're definitely trying to leverage as much grant dollars as possible for this project. As you can see, this is one of the potential funding mechanisms. The reason why we're here tonight, the Community Development Block Grant is another funding mechanism that we're looking to do. Some of the council members early on remember that we were we were not actually eligible for Community Development Block Grant funding. We were below the threshold at the time of what was required from a low moderate income perspective. You were above 51.5% LMI. You were eligible to apply for these monies. At the data we had from 2010, I believe, had us at about 49.5%. Right before we were about to submit and go out and kind of do a random sampling of the community, we were notified that our LMI actually increased to about 61 or almost 62%. So the positive of that is we're eligible for these block grant funding to help leverage for the downtown plan and hopefully future construction. The downside is that, the low moderate income here is a challenge that, it's another challenge the city's gonna have to take on. We have to talk about providing, sufficient types of affordable housing and everything else. So the projects that we have going on right now in the downtown plan, the master plan is going to address that. That's one of the reasons why we're applying for the community development block grant. We're identifying there is a need, from a low moderate income standpoint, there is a need for some source of affordable housing. This is one mechanism, one opportunity that we look at is maybe providing some of that affordable housing in the downtown area. Some of the other activities that are underneath the block grant, again, the maximum allocation that we can see that we can receive that we're applying for is $25,000 for the block grant for the planning exercise. But from a construction standpoint, when John talked about it, in the future, because we are qualified right now, we could almost leverage up to, I believe it's $500,000 would be the maximum we could receive for reconstruction of Main Street. We've had this number in mind. We don't have concrete numbers, but this project could be $2 million, could be $3 million. It really depends on what the scope is at the end of the day, but as you can see, we're trying as a staff, as a community here, to try to leverage as much grant money with minimum amount of taxpayer supported or borrowing that we have to do. So that's why, a couple of these large grant programs that we're looking at right now, we're gonna be applying for grants. And, you know, one of the main needs why we started this was because of the fact that, I know this project's been discussed for 20 years. I know that we still have to get over the hurdle. I know that there's gonna be some challenges, there's gonna be some very important and difficult decisions by the common council in the future, but we have aging infrastructure in the downtown that needs to get fixed. I think we've been fortunate, but I mean, our infrastructure is over 100 years old right now. So there's definitely a need on that side of it, and there's also a need to provide that economic spark into the downtown as well. You know, in talking with state representatives, and Nolita Burr, who's our community rep here, you know, other communities that have gone through this process, we know that it's gonna be a challenge up front. We know that it's gonna be a distraction. It could hurt a couple businesses, but the long-term economic vitality that's gonna come from this project and the amenities that we put back into the downtown, I think it's gonna be a tremendous economic boost to the community as a whole for attracting and redeveloping some more of the downtown from the best downtown practice standpoint. And we'll hopefully bring in some new businesses and other developments within the area. So with that, I'm going to, part of the public hearing process that John spoke about earlier, if there's anyone from, you know, the public standpoint that's here tonight, if they have any comments that they would like to make, we ask that you make those comments now. Once the public hearing is actually closed, we do still have a planning commission meeting. I apologize, it's, 6:30, it's nice outside. Hopefully we can get this over in the next 20 or so minutes, but we do have a planning commission meeting that my goal and consensus is to kind of have all the committees that are around the table right here. Some of you guys, hopefully everyone knows each other, but we never had this interaction before, and that's why we're trying, we would like to hopefully at least get some discussion, get some of the public comments that we need to finalize some of the draft. We want to get some comments of what people think about the alternatives that were presented and everything else. So I guess we'll start from the.
Do you have any other presentation items?
No.
Should I just proceed with the public hearing then, to close that out?
Yes.
Okay. Then at this time, we'll go through a series of questions, and testimony in favor of the subject. We'd ask you to give your name and address, and we usually set a 3-minute limit, but I think that's fine if you want to go on a little bit longer. But we need your name and address, and this will be part of the public hearing, and we are tape recording the meeting. So is there any testimony in favor of the subject? Testimony in favor? Is there any testimony in opposition of the subject? Need your name and address. Testimony in opposition of the subject? Again, testimony in favor and testimony in opposition? If not, then we will call the public hearing closed at 6:40 p.m. We'll then move on to our City Plan Commission. We need a motion then to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Lutzy, second by Keelan to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The next item is discussion items, Community Development Block Grant Planning Program. Brandon, what would you like to present this time?
What I wanted to do, it's really twofold. It's talking about the block grants, those parts of it, but I really wanted to also just focus on the downtown plan, what was presented to you guys this evening. I'm kind of just, I really just want to get, a conversation going, a consensus. If there's individuals from the public that would like to make a comment to the planning commission or the other commissions and committees that are here. Again, no action is being taken tonight. Those opportunities are going to be coming in the next couple of weeks. But, I just want to kind of have a general conversation of what you guys like about the process. If there are questions from any of the committee members that are here, whether it's the common council, the planning commission, or the visioning committee, if there's concerns that you guys see or have heard, just want to have those, that discussion occur right now, so that, when we make the presentations in the next couple of weeks, that all this information from the public hearing is also considered within the final draft as well. So I guess I'm going to open it up to the table a little bit. If there are, comments that people have right now, to at least start the conversation.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start,
Thank you,
just to
Pat.
get the, surprise, just to get the ball rolling a little bit. I'm a little bit confused, and I'll show, I'll just try to explain my confusion. There are three possible exhibits that you have in the back, and you showed us up here,
Yep.
okay? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard you say that you were gonna try to get next week, I think the 27th, that the downtown planning, or downtown visioning committee would look at that and try to narrow that down if possible.
Right.
And then we, as a planning commission, are gonna meet in approximately 2 weeks. And then we'll look at whatever one of those, or all three of those exhibits, I'm only calling them exhibits, because
Alternatives.
that's what you have up there. And then, I think you're looking for the planning commission then to make a recommendation on one of those. Is that,
One or three, I mean,
okay, let's stop right there before you get, okay, even one or three, but we're gonna make some kind of a recommendation to the city council
Correct.
that will say, we're not sure which of these three, but you guys go ahead and kick at the cat and decide which of the three you want. I mean, is that sort of what you're suggesting?
I'm looking at a preferred option.
Okay.
Let's call it that. There's two
Okay.
aspects that we're looking for. One is to just generally adopt the draft downtown visioning plan. That's not just these alternatives, it's everything, all the work that the visioning committee has put to date. There's actually gonna be a booklet and a handout that's gonna be prepared for you guys and everything else.
Okay. Okay, so, let me just continue my thought before I
Yep.
lose it here.
Yep.
So we do that, we discuss it at the planning commission, after the visioning commission's looked at, our committee looked at it, and we come up with something to recommend to the council. My question comes in really is, then when I saw that you had, the long list of different, on the agenda, the time frame, all the different points, it sounded as though maybe we would, let's just say we use exhibit number 6 there as our preferred
Preferred option.
yeah, there you go, preferred option, and we make that recommendation, and maybe even the council makes that recommendation. But it sounded to me as though over the course of this long period of time, that could all be changed again.
It could be, that is correct. I mean, again, what the planning commission, what the downtown visioning committee, I understand, there's three options. And the reason we came to the three is because we couldn't get consensus early on in the process of narrowing it down to one of these options. So that's why we felt as a visioning committee and the group as a whole, let's present three options to the community, get their input on what it is. Eric and I have talked about this, I mean, at the end of the day, we don't, if it comes to a conclusion that there's not a preferred option, we're okay with that. If we have to take a hand vote, say, okay, 3 people prefer this option, 2 people prefer this one, that's okay. The final visioning plan and document can have all three alternatives in there, we're okay with that. Because again, each one of these comes with different challenges, and each one comes with different positives and negatives at the end.
But at some point along the process, I suppose it's at the design phase or somewhere, somebody's gonna have to say, okay, well, which do you want? Do you want the hybrid parking? Do you want parallel parking? I mean, how are you gonna make it?
It is, so.
Maybe, John, you probably know more about that than I do.
Yeah, if I could, I think what we're trying to do here is set up the downtown visioning, not agree on a master plan at this point or anything beyond that. What we have right now are 3 concepts, 3 alternatives, if you will, to consider as part of our downtown vision. They're all applicable, they all might work. We're waiting for the parking study, we're waiting for further analysis from an engineering firm.
I try to be an engineer, so they're drawn correctly.
Yeah, but they're good, they're basically, the point being that they're good, they're 3 good options that need further study.
Correct.
And what we're saying as a visioning committee, a plan commission, and ultimately council is that these 3 work for, if there's one that needs to be tossed out at this point, which we haven't really come to consensus on the downtown visioning committee level, there's still 3 options on the table. If that's what moves forward, on the plan commission now, I'm still comfortable with those 3 options. I don't want to prematurely narrow something down because, well, that might be where we want to go. I'd rather leave the 3 options on the table, get the traffic impact study done with the peak use times in the summer, get the preliminary studies done, give those tools to the planner, the engineer who works on the master plan to say, here's the options now, and here's the data, here's all the public input sessions to take it to the next level, but we'll give them the guideline tool, the visioning document as a tool in developing that master plan.
Do you
So-
see then, John, do you see that somewhere along that process, that lengthy process, it'll come back to the planning commission again?
Yeah, I think definitely the master planning that occurs,
Okay.
you're on your schedule there, if you wanna, do you wanna flip to that quick? That's that, we had that all broken down, I think that was a good indicator of what you can expect. Yeah,
There you go.
so the downtown master plan completed December of 2016. To have the master plan completed, I'm assuming that's gonna need commission and council approval to adopt the master
We're
plan.
gonna just bypass everybody.
Just bypass it, yeah.
No, I mean, it's gonna, I mean, we haven't fully discussed internally how that's gonna work, if it's just a subcommittee of staff members, maybe there's one member from the planning. We haven't fully discussed what that planning team is gonna be yet, but I can assure everybody that's in this room right now and everybody else is that we're gonna be transparent, and this is not gonna be a closed door process, and that the public process and the public hearings and the public input sessions are definitely gonna be occurring, and we're gonna make that a priority as we go through
Right,
this.
so our vision plan that, once drafted, will be one of the tools in the toolbox for the consultant to be hired by the city, along with the traffic study, along with a couple other pieces that they can use to produce a document, along with public hearing, or public listening sessions, et cetera, to assemble plans based on this to take back to the concept plans and then eventually adopt a master plan.
I mean,
On that timeline.
and Pat, to your point and John's point, you know, we've done some of the initial legwork, pretty much for whatever consultant. We've at least narrowed it down, hopefully, to 3 options or alternatives. There may still be modifications for one of those options. Yes, we still have design criteria that we will have to adopt with. You know, for instance, and I'm gonna use this as an example, if the council makes the decision that we're gonna accept this, say we get awarded money, and we have to go to the federal parallel park and everything else, there's still other options that we can talk about in that we've discussed through the planning process. You know, yes, we have to, maybe have to put bike lanes in. You know, that option we talked about had 22-foot sidewalks, maybe we put a 5-foot rain garden down the side. So there's a lot of different design elements within itself that still have to be discussed, but at least from the standpoint, to John's point, yes, we've at least narrowed that option down there. I mean, who knows, as another option, what if we went with the green boulevard down the middle? Would that suffice as meeting standards? I don't know. That was eliminated early on in the process, but, you know, that could be. But at least from the standpoint here, we have 3 alternatives that, again, that do work. It's part of the toolbox. I think from a standpoint from the planning commission visioning, I think they'd be like to have some consensus which one's preferred, because I think that's not only gonna help us as staff at the end of the day, but as council has to make the decisions in the future, you know, is it more valuable from a business, you know, economic vitality standpoint? You know what, we don't want to accept these monies because we've heard from the community that we need to keep the animal parking. You know, we have that option still in there, so.
So it sounds to me like basically you're gonna use the planning commission just sort of to get the ball rolling. We'll send it to the council and say, here are some options, and then it'll come back to us, who knows, 6 months, a year later, and to look at.
I definitely expect the planning commission is gonna be part of this master planning process.
Okay.
I know that the ultimate decision is gonna be council, but because we have such an active chamber, Terry, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Will the chamber be, I don't even know how to word this. Are you guys on board with all of this? And are you gonna be right with us through all of this reconstruction and planning and all? Okay.
Yep, we talked about that with Henry and both Brennan, that we'll do as much as we can to help keep the businesses on board of what's going on and do as much as we can, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, going back to the parking, in this traffic study, does it will include things like parallel parking? Is it safer than angle parking or not? And will it block traffic more going through town when people stop, back up, fiddle around? You know, is it gonna hinder traffic? As a driver's ed instructor, I'm not so sure about that parallel parking. It's so much easier to go in and out of an angle stall, and safer in my mind. Period.
And you have, I mean, honestly, your perspective is.
Growing up here, we don't have that much parallel parking, so kids aren't accustomed to it either. I think you could become accustomed to parallel parking. That would be an immediate concern, I thought.
I
You
don't.
have to do, you can't say parking study, you gotta say what.
Parking utilization study.
Okay, explain what that is.
So,
Okay.
the main emphasis, I mean, the utilization study that we're gonna do, is along the lines, again, the scope hasn't been fully defined, but, you know, we've heard comments through this entire process that either A, there's too much parking in downtown, or B, there's not enough.
Who is saying there's too much?
I've actually heard people that said that there's too much parking because
It's the first
they
I've
feel.
heard it.
I've heard both sides of it through this entire process. I mean, I've heard, you know, because people can walk downtown middle of the day and there's parking spots all over the place. Now, again, we also have to take in, the utilization study will take into peak times, and I think that's the difference of opinion, is that some people drive down there during middle of the day, it's not that busy. So they feel that there is too much parking, and when there are some peak times in the seasons or during the day, there's not enough parking, people have to park a block off. The utilization study that's gonna be conducted is gonna identify, you know, what the existing uses are right now in the downtown. They're pretty much, as John said, they go by every hour. They'll mark the stalls, they'll mark the cars that are out there, how long people are actually staying out there. On a side note, yes, we know that we have an issue with some enforcement down there. We're trying to alleviate some of that. But, I mean, the utilization identifies, based on the uses that are out there right now, from the statistical standpoint, there's different formulas that they utilize. Is there enough parking in the downtown area, whether it's Main Street, whether it's the parking lots that the city owns that are a block or two off? You know, is there enough parking in the downtown? Again, we can may come up at the end of the day that, no, we don't have enough. Or that there is, you know, again, during these peak times, you know, maybe it's over, you know, we may have to look at other alternatives. The other part of it is that there are some, I'm expecting to have some forecasting models built into that as well. Downtown is what it is today. What is downtown gonna be in 3 years? What's downtown gonna be in 5 years? You may see a different mixture of businesses downtown. You may see some more of the professional services maybe move out of downtown. You see more retail, more commercial, more restaurants in downtown. That drives a different set of individuals, different set of traffic patterns into the downtown area, whether it's automobile or anything else. So we have to take all those into consideration. So we'll forecast a couple of those different models as well as part of the utilization study to better inform us of what we have out there right now, you know, and, you know, again, if the city may need to look at purchasing a lot and everything else, you know, and I'll be, you know, there is also the challenge that I think that we have to deal with, and is just, and I'm gonna use the word change. You know, there's, you know, a lot of people that have lived up here, you know, they have, I'll say, their patterns and everything else, and, you know, again, it's just the way of life that they have right now, but, you know, there's also some of the people that I've talked to that, again, we don't know what downtown's gonna be in the future, and, you know, patterns may have to change. I mean, people that go to a Walmart or a Target are probably walking just as far as one of our lots that we own right now. It's, you know, again, the way that, you know, and I think it's just, you know, the way people operate and everything else, you know, yes, there may be a challenge, and I'm gonna look to John a little bit, because he's done some of these other projects in the past, but yes, if we, you know, if there is the discussion that we lose some of the parking, or we change the parking downtown, some of the spots are relocated, is that gonna be a positive or benefit, you know, to the community? So, again, long way forward, but. Okay.
I just want to say, I guess go on record, my bias towards the angle parking for three things. I like it because it's worked well for our business for 30 years. Our customers are not going to walk a block or 2 blocks to come to our store, our current customers. Number two, I think that parallel parking skills have been lost by most people, and the people I've talked to, the customers we've talked to have been just, they can't imagine having parallel parking downtown with the amount of traffic downtown. But I think number three, the third reason I like it, or third reason that we should think about is, we're talking about making the sidewalks wider for theoretical uses of the sidewalk, but have we ever, our climate up here is not that great. Out of the 12 months of the year, we maybe have 14 weeks when there's a possibility of a nice enough day to use the sidewalk. And of those 14 weeks, there's a lot of days when it's too windy, too hot, too cold, too rainy. And I just think we should be looking at, has it worked in any city that's similar to Waupaca, not someplace that's right next to Madison or Milwaukee, but someplace that's further away, where they've been able to use the sidewalks for a good part of the year for what we're giving up for parking.
Don?
If I could just piggyback on Ken's thing, we're talking about, I think from what I saw before, we figure our sidewalks are 10 feet now,
Correct.
and you're looking at 16 to 22 feet from what I saw.
Yep.
One thing with Ken's climate situation, those of us that shovel the sidewalks and remove the snow, 10 feet's plenty to get the snow off. You go to 16 feet, now you're talking 22 feet. That's a lot of snow to move off, and as I recall, on Ken's list, there was also somebody who talked about better snow removal, which could be sidewalks or street, which is just a thought for those of us that actually live down there and have to take care of that too, so.
And I would say, I'm not sure when you're doing your parking study is the right time of year for downtown. Summer is our lowest time of the year for traffic in our business. So just another point.
When's your peak, when would you say your peak time is?
Our peak time, of course, is December, but we do February, May, and December are 3 months, are our big months.
Yeah, and the hard part is everybody.
And everybody else has different ones, but summertime downtown is dead a lot of days. There aren't people downtown. So it's just something to consider when you're looking at those. There were January and February, there were multiple weeks where all week long you could not find parking stalls. I said, where's the parking study now? Because it was just, there was a lot of traffic. So, no, March, it was horrible. But it's just trends. But, so just to keep that in mind too, we can't base it on just a short time for the traffic.
No, I think we need 2 parking surveys. One in whatever we call off and whatever we call on. Yesterday, if you look down Main Street, North Main, there were probably 5 cars on North Main. That's what yesterday was. And then the next day can be busy. It's not constant. And summer there are different kinds of shoppers. And there are younger shoppers, and they walk more easily. In winter, it's people whose kids are, I think there's people without kids who shop in the wintertime. My busiest months are quarter. Summer being the second.
Okay. Other comments?
But I also think that we could do a study and find out what are some Canadian towns about our size or Vermont towns about our size, and see with the same kind of climate, do people sit outside on a nice winter day and have a cup of hot cocoa or do they? I think they might, because we're used to wearing warm clothes. And it has to do with the atmosphere and the place finding.
Other comments from anybody else that's sitting around the table, what was presented? Is there, from, the 3 alternatives that we have, is there, again, I don't want to say a consensus, but thoughts on which one, people envision downtown Waupaca being?
I am wondering with the potential of those 2 blocks being designated part of Highway 10, depending on what the parking utilization might show, whether or not, and the accident rate, and all these things listed out in the paperwork, if we may have to choose parallel if we do alterations. Is that a possibility, that those 2 blocks may have to be parallel? And then there would really even be another option we need to look at, maybe angled staying on the other blocks and parallel if it has to be on those.
I think to John's point before, that 2 sections from Badger to Fulton Street, is, I think that's another hurdle we have to deal with. I think,
Is it a real possibility, though, that
I-
it might be said, well, you have to do parallel?
With federal funds, absolutely.
Okay.
It's maybe a slim chance to change that, I don't know.
Mhm.
I mean, it'd have to be submitted, that's why I suggest you do it up front
Right.
before you burn a lot of money
Mhm.
and find that out.
And is the process of, because in reality, that is no longer really utilized as Highway 10 corridor at all.
Well,
What is that possibility of, is that a federal thing then? And who are
I don't
we
know what the
to have that
de-designation of that, I don't know anything really about the national highway system, to be honest with you, but you're still dealing with the bicycle issue with there's legislation, you're dealing with the federal design manual.
And both of those things, the bike is federal as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
and the reason that they get rid of angle parking is a safety issue, and it's based on safety studies and all that. I mean, that's why the feds go for it, okay? They don't just like it because they like it. There's safety studies that indicate that it's safer for not just bicycles, because the angle parking was gone long before there were bike regulations. You know, so it's a safety issue, and that's why they require it.
Well, that may be a very real design consideration and have a huge impact.
Well, absolutely. So how you design them, if you go to Appleton, they look at angle or parallel parking a little bit different down there. They have 20-foot stalls, and they have a 10-foot square between the stalls. It's still a 25-foot stall, but it gives you the visual appearance of backing them out. Now, I know, I'm not a big advocate of switching to parallel down here either, to be real honest with you, but you have to weigh all things.
And I think to really weigh all things, as I understand it, is the city does not have to change the angle parking if it chooses not to do that, still do the reconstruction. But if you want to apply for the grant, it'll cost you $200,000 to $300,000 that you could otherwise get if you choose to change it. So then you have to ask yourself, is it worth $200,000 as an example, or $300,000 to leave it as is? And I think that resonates really, it's a difficult question for people whose business are affected by that.
Yeah.
But the other members of the community who are not affected by that in terms of their livelihoods, okay, I love the downtown and I come down as much as I can, but obviously my livelihood isn't affected, but my taxes are. So then it's a question of why aren't we utilizing a grant when we have the opportunity? And
Sure,
so
I
that's the argument, and it's not an easy one, I'm sure, and the council, you're gonna have trouble wrestling with that, I'm sure. As the planning commission is, but you guys get the last kick at the cat there, and you're gonna have to deal with it. That's what some people will say. Why aren't we utilizing that grant? And there you go.
But as a staff person, I mean, we have this conversation all the time as we've been working through this. But the visioning committee talked about a dozen other elements of that vision that I'm kind of hearing that there's a lot of really good stuff in here that people can buy into. It's just really boiling down to the parking configuration. And that's why this utilization study, I think, is helpful. Will it give you give the council and the decision makers what they need? And we hope so. It should. But adopting the vision is more than just the parking, I guess what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of other elements in here that I think most of the committee is okay with. It's got consensus on it.
yeah, I mean, it's the design elements. I mean, we talked about, John's gone, the bump outs at the corners, everything else.
We're gonna put you in a snowplow. Let you drive.
Oh, I know, I still have to fight Roger on this, but I mean, there are, and to Henry's point, there are other design elements that we talked about that are in the plan. We talk about, again, we go back to creating that sense of place, again, even just the minimal, the bump outs on the corners creates a sense of place, it creates a sense of identity. Again, there's so many different options and alternatives that we have when we look at, some of the image preference surveys that we did, and we'll probably continue to do, is again, do we do, brick, instead of concrete? I mean, those are some of the other elements that we put in here. This has been for a very long time since we started this, the parking and everything else has always been a significant issue. And, we're not taking it lightly at the end of the day, and we're gonna, as a staff perspective, we'll be working with, the council as we make those decisions, but, from the other elements that I presented, is there anything that people like, dislike, we wanna change? Just trying to get, other comments of what you like about, regardless of what's put aside for a second, the parking, what's put aside, the alternatives, is there anything of any of these plans that people appreciate, don't like, want to see different options, I guess? You know, regardless of grant dollars or anything else right now, the three options that were presented to the planning commission, everybody else here tonight, are there aspects of one plan or the other that people like or dislike? I guess I'll put it that way, again, regardless of what design elements we have to deal with in the future and everything else. Is there a plan that people want, that they are, I don't wanna say more in love with, but they like? Just trying to get, a little bit of thought here.
One part of exhibit, the parallel parking one, that I don't totally agree with is the closing of Session Street and making it all green space. I think it's a vital artery to our downtown.
I agree with that.
If you come and stand in Fletcher's Jewelry for a day, you would be amazed at the number of people that use Session Street.
It's linked to.
No, I mean, you're talking more, from the concept of.
Of traffic flow.
Right, none of these plans actually really talked about closing it, well, you're talking, the conceptual plan.
Section plan, okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
The
It
conceptual
was
plan.
green and out in the one,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, you're talking about this right here. Maybe this is a little bit better map to look at, but, so, we never really, dove into full detail of what that green space actually meant. Was it, do we put a green boulevard down there, don't put parking on there as an option? Again, is that linkage? I don't think we ever looked at it saying, we're gonna fully close it, but that could be an option, there's no doubt about that. Could it be more of an active engagement space? I know early on in the discussions, we talked about maybe moving could that be a space for the farmer's market or something, because it is that connection to Rotary Riverview Park, but, that's definitely a comment that, that's good to hear, that at least at a minimum, we don't want to close Session Street. So,
Right.
that's definitely.
Well, I think the other thought too was through design, try to drive more traffic up to that very north block because there's just not a lot of activity. They struggle up there. I think a couple of members, maybe through design, you can get more foot traffic up there.
And that's some of the design elements that we talked about, some of the early projects or early design plans that, we presented to the vision committee actually had a green boulevard going all the way through the middle of Main Street. It was like roughly a 10-foot boulevard. That would have to be more along the lines of utilizing the parallel parking method. But we actually, one of the design ideas that we thought about was having a boulevard that would, go out the length of the way. Because again, we're trying to create a sense of place and placemaking, and putting those type of elements drive interest, drive attraction to the entire length of the street. Because, yes, we understand, we've heard that there are challenges on the north end of Main Street, and again, part of it is just the quality or the types of businesses that are up there right now. If we create a better diversification of businesses, that's gonna draw more interest up there. Yes, I agree that we need to find out a way to drive more traffic up there as well, whether it's pedestrian traffic, by foot, by vehicle, if it's a branding strategy, and we talk about these different gateways, that would, from a placemaking element, would attract more people up there. If we look at, when we tear down John's building, in the future for public works, everything else, do we look at maybe creating that as more of a focal point at the end of Main Street? That would drive more people up there. So it's those type of placemaking pieces that we've talked about through this process that we know and we've identified, we have to take into consideration when we do the next phase of the master plan. I envision when we go through the master planning process, whoever the consultant's gonna be, they're gonna take this plan, identify, yes, we agree that, some of these may be underutilized, great for mixed-use development. There is already a master plan that was created for Rotary Riverview Park and a potential trail extension. Maybe they expand on that into this green space up here, the city owns some more parkland. We talk about maybe having, restaurants or, other types of establishments that overlook the river. Those are the type, elements that's gonna, again, I think, drive traffic up there. There's gonna be a market study component that's gonna be attached into here as well, but it's those other elements. And I can tell you, one of the options early on that we eliminated was one-way streets, so I don't think that's gonna come into fruition either. But, we talked about, as one element was drive traffic to the north, because that's what we heard concerns about, let's do a one-way street, but that was eliminated as well. Other comments?
When we spoke about the bike lanes, the angle parking, was there accommodations, could you accommodate for basically that
No.
Not bike
You
lanes.
can't, you pretty much can't, from a federal design standpoint, you can't do angle parking with bike lanes unless, I mean, the only option would be, but then you're talking about, you know, you have to create literally a segregated lane, you know, some way, shape, or form, whether it's on the inside of the parallel parking or anything along those lines. You know, I'm looking at John and John for a
Well,
second, but.
what I can tell you is, I've seen where it's a very wide street, you have angle park, and they have a back out lane that's not a through lane, and then they merge onto a through lane. Now, you might be able to accommodate a bike lane in between all that, but I don't know if you're gonna, I don't know if you're gonna be able to put you're not gonna be able to put a bike lane behind that angle parking.
I
You
mean,
might be successful in going to the side streets and saying that the bike traffic is accommodated on Franklin and Division, or Franklin and Jefferson, I'm sorry, Washington and Jefferson. You might be able to do that, but I don't know if you're gonna be able to accommodate it with this.
From just design standards, I mean, we can't even, you know, there's this concept of, they're called sharrows, pretty much, so it's a, you know, they called it, you know, it's a little bit wider of a travel lane, but it's shared bike and car, so there's literally a drawn line, but again, you still have the conflict with people backing out. I mean, that's angle parking and bike lanes, regardless of sharrow.
But
whether
it
it's
seems like parallel parking, they allow it. You know, you gotta get in and out of the
Where do they
parallel.
put the bike lane when there's parallel parking?
Well, sometimes they stripe it actually between the two. Sometimes, some cities have
Do you mean
actually.
between the sidewalk and the car? Where?
No,
that's-
between
the
the.
travel lane and the parked car, right?
Yeah, in the
Oh,
middle.
in there, okay.
Some cities have actually striped the through lane as the bike lane. I mean, literally, in the middle of a through lane, there's bike marks.
And when you're saying through lane, explain that. I
Well,
don't know
point
that
to
term.
it.
The travel
Just like
lane.
it's shown right there.
Actually,
Where
it's
the
right here.
cars,
So you can see it, I mean, this is one
I don't-
option.
So
This is what a sharrow,
It's like-
you know, a sharrow is, it's a shared bike and.
Personally, I don't like that because I drove on one recently and I thought I was in a restricted lane that I shouldn't be in.
I know what you're saying.
But it was a through lane, but they met some standard because they slapped down the paint. And a bike legally can be in a through lane, you know? So maybe there's some education here too, but I don't know. I mean, that, John might know, but you gotta delve into the federal standards and you gotta look into all that.
Yeah,
There's
a lot-
exclusions, there's this and that,
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
yeah, there is a lot. And we, you know, it's something you maybe have worked on, we haven't worked on in quite a while.
Yeah, it's much more compatible with, to get back to the, it's much more compatible with parallel than with angle. Angle is very,
Which doesn't make sense because you're moving in and out with a parallel stall.
And what about the car doors?
Restricted sight distance and car
door
doors and,
swing and all that.
yeah, all that, but
So we put in parallel parking to get to the grant, and it doesn't work for downtown. Is there regulations on us switching back to angle a year later?
It's the width of the street.
The width of
Once
the width
you
of
touch-
the,
I mean,
the width of the street's always gonna be there, it's always gonna have 80.
right, you're always gonna have.
But if you,
If you're not moving the sidewalks, I mean, if you, in your, okay.
well, the feds aren't gonna allow it. They'd come back and say, use federal money, you can't restripe
Okay,
it.
okay, that was my
I
question.
think that, yeah, if you're gonna go with parallel parking, you know, you gotta want it. I mean, maybe not everybody, but I think you're gonna want a majority of the people supportive of it, and you might not get to that point. And as Pat said, that decision might be 3 years from now, 4 years from now. You know, I don't know. I mean, it's not now. And is anybody surprised that there's 3 options? I mean, there should be. There should be differing opinions on all this, you know?
You know, something else that's changing as new cars come out is that beep, 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 and the picture of how you go, you know? And that's coming up just like electric cars and all these kind of different things are coming into our future. Somebody's always gonna be having an old pickup, somebody's always gonna have an old car. But there are gonna be more and more cars that safely come out and you get. So that
And-
factors in.
Not every community takes advantage of STP urban money, you know, not every community's try to get federal money because there's strings. And it costs a little bit more and the standards are higher and you've got more costs in design and, you know, there's all that, but it like I said, it comes with strings, you know.
I just don't wanna see our downtown die. We are lucky enough to have a very vibrant downtown. And that's what I'm afraid of.
One concept, I think, too, is what's the tail and what's the dog here. Talking about $2 or $3 million worth of tax money or whatever money to do this downtown project, when you look at the value of downtown, the value of the businesses, I mean, we have $500,000 just in our little business. When you multiply it down the street, I don't know what the value is downtown here, but you're looking at tens of millions of dollars. You don't want
You don't want us all selling
parking
and
to kill the
going.
businesses.
The value of the visioning area, only because I had to do it for the grant, is about 25 million. In the study area that we have right now, that's actually identified on the back maps, you can kind of see in the gray and the red outline, that's about 25 million that it's valued at right now. I mean,
The real estate,
Well, just a comment on that, and I love our downtown, as I say, I've been a patron of almost everything downtown for years and years, and will continue. My wife and I love it. But I also think, because we're on the planning commission, we are always looking at things from a long term. We have to, whether it's zoning, or redoing streets, or whatever, businesses. I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that our community also needs to look forward with its downtown. As much as I understand you're being, afraid of losing the downtown with some changes, I think that there might be some big positives that might increase rather than decrease what's happening in the downtown. I think that we're always looking for kind of reinventing ourselves. I think we have to do that as a small community. And there's a lot of ways, a lot of positive things that were up there that had nothing to do with the parking and the street flow. But people want to come downtown for a variety of reasons. And I think that, the parking is going to be a concern, obviously, but I think a lot of people will come for other things anyway, and will want to do that. And I think we just need to be open to that. And it won't bother me in the slightest if I have to walk more or have a little harder time parking, because I love it. But I know what you're talking about. People in general want to make it as easy and accessible as possible. I know that's how we operate. But at the same time, we have to look long range in terms of where we're going in terms of our downtown.
Any other comments? I know it's been a long meeting, I appreciate everyone being able to stay here and at least listen, so.
If that's it, is there a motion for adjournment?
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And what time we got?
7:18.
Thank you.